everybody. My name is Casey Ruff, and I will be teaching this module. I'm kind of just calling this an introduction to strength training and program design. Obviously, this will be a bit of a flyby. You'll have more materials we need to dig into, to become certified as a personal trainer. But I wanted to give you some of my experience and things I've learned along the way about program design, strength training. Like I said, my name is Casey Ruff. I've been a personal trainer since March of 2007, which is coming up on 18 years now, 18 and a half years, excuse me. And I've been fortunate to make this a career for myself for that time, which has been amazing. I think it's really cool that you're going through the certification to become the same. It is a challenge, but it is a very rewarding career for sure. In my time of personal training, I've acquired multiple certifications. I believe I've got somewhere around 10 or 12 different certifications in exercise, strength training design, nutrition, obviously low carbohydrate and carnivore nutrition. I myself have been a carnivore for 6.5 years now. Seen plenty of amazing results with that. And yeah, in my journey of becoming a personal trainer for as long as I have trained hundreds, thousands of people at this point. Many different goals, different economic kind of situations. Especially through the pandemic, lots of different ways of training people, either virtually with full gym equipment, with limited gym equipment, with water bottles at home on the trunk of a tree or the banister of a stairs. In some cases, a lot of my day is traveling around to my clients here in the Salt Lake Valley where I live to train them in their workout rooms, which could be their garages or their unfinished basements or wherever they may be. So in that time, like I said, I've had lots of different clients. Some have been professional athletes, others have been stay-at-home moms. I've trained people as young as 12 years old as people in their 80s, and everything in between. Some people have, kind of like visual goals. They want to look a certain way, have a certain aesthetic. Other people are training again for performance in their respective sports. And yeah, so lots of different experience that I've had along the way. I have, like I said, with all the different, methods I've seen out there, things I've been trained on, I've been able to learn a lot of different things and find what I would consider some of the best methods to train, regardless of how you go about that specifically with each individual client. There are some general principles, again, that I want to share with you today that I think apply for many, many people. Another advantage that I have is that during the 2020 pandemic, where I was working for a large corporate gym, as well as my wife, Bethany, who ran a Pilates program and does tissue release work, we were placed on unemployment. And as part of that, we had to start our own company, which is called Boundless. So we started that in July of 2020, so we could continue training our people. I'm also the host of Boundless Body Radio, which is a health podcast. It's normally one of the top 150, health and nutrition podcasts on Apple, which has been a tremendous asset as far as being able to host so many people in our space, not only the carnivore space, but exercise space, to learn about these principles, people that do research, that also, have been calling balls and strikes in exercise physiology and program design for decades now. So that's been a wonderful journey and a great way to learn along the way. We do releases every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And as you can imagine, if you do that for 5 years, you're going to have quite a bit of content. So we have over 900 recorded episodes at this point and no intention of slowing down anytime soon. So that gives me a chance to ask questions about personal training to some of the best world experts and researchers out there who are doing amazing work in protein synthesis, personal training, different philosophies, all kinds of stuff. So that's been great. All that to say is hopefully I've acquired a little bit of knowledge and I can help orient you. And again, regardless of what direction you take as far as the exact certification, some of these principles should be shining through in your program design as you decide what specifically you are going to be helping people with. So that was the introduction. This is kind of what I had as far as what we're going to talk about briefly today. First of all, we're going to define what exercise is and how that's evolved in my thinking. We're going to talk about what it means to create a stimulus, to create a response in the body and have the body go through an adaptation. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about one of my favorite things to talk about and learn about called Henneman's principle, which is all about slow twitch and fast twitch muscle fiber activation, how you are able to do that inside the body. We're going to talk about the teeter-totter relationship between volume and intensity. We're going to be talking about exercise selection, how you choose which exercises to do as you're choosing a program for somebody. And finally, we're going to talk about some of the variables. It's almost not quite in the frame, but variables down there that you can change to either create differences as far as results go for your clients, depending on what they're after, or if you need to create variables for no other reason than it keeps the program interesting and keeps your clients engaged with what you're doing, which is really, really important. So we'll go into those details. Like I said, this will be a bit of a flyby, but hopefully as you're done with this video and you watch some of the videos that I've recorded already with some of the exercises, when we see exercise selection, you'll have a better sense of how to set this up, test it out on yourself, and then you can start testing it out on your clients. Okay, defining exercise. This is something that I've definitely evolved my thinking on over time. Exercise to me for a long time was something where you were out and moving your body in a certain way, whether that was jogging, whether that was playing a sport, whether that was lifting weights, doing an aerobics class of some kind. All of that to me was some form of an exercise. And since I have been doing personal training for so many years, I've decided to change my kind of thinking around what I define as exercise. And I'm going to borrow this from a fantastic book, one that really has transformed my way of thinking around personal training, which is called Body by Science by Doug McGuff, MD, and John Little. So here's what they say on page 3 about exercise. And here is how they define exercise. Exercise is a specific activity that stimulates a positive psychological adaptation that serves to enhance fitness and health and does not undermine the latter in the process of enhancing the former. So what that is talking about is something much more specific than the exercises, quote unquote exercises that I mentioned earlier. I now refer to those as either activities or skills. So for example, if I go on a mountain biking ride, that to me is an activity. Obviously, with mountain biking, there's specific skills that I can work on to improve my mountain biking. But that in itself does not fit this definition of what exercise truly is. It's not specific enough that stimulates a positive psychological, physiological adaptation that serves to enhance fitness and health. That's more like it's an activity. You might think of it as a skill. That's where I put most sports. I just got off the ice for an hour and a half game of ice hockey, and yes, I got my heart rate elevated, and yes, it was challenging, and there's a lot going on, but I don't think of that as exercise. I don't do that to improve my physical health. That is a skill and a sport, in my opinion, which is very different than the way that they define exercise. So with that much more narrow kind of window of what exercise is, it means we have to be much more specific about what we're giving our clients to make sure that we're creating a principle where people are progressing in their overall fitness and in their health. And so that kind of takes us to this next thought, which is a stimulus, a response, and an adaptation. So all of this is to say that when we do exercise that, again, is given in a very specific way for a specific reason and an adaptation, what we do, if we just assume that this is our health over time and it's on kind of a slight decline for as long as we live, we see that when we have an event with exercise, what we're actually doing is creating a stimulus inside the body that actually takes our health down quite a bit acutely after we do the exercise. So I could measure many different markers on you before you walked into a gym and after you walked into the gym. And if you did the right thing while you were in the gym, your health should be far worse off leaving the gym than it was when you entered the gym. And sometimes that surprises people. But all of that is to say, we need this stimulus to create a response inside of our body. So what our body does when it's taken to a certain level where we are sufficiently creating this type of a stimulus, the body is literally like torn up, like you're tearing up like muscle tissue and that sort of thing. But it begins a process of a response. The body will respond to the stimulus that you gave it to be able to build itself back up. If you want to think of it in the way that like we evolved, your body is really lazy and it wants to save calories rather than use a bunch of calories. If it can get away with, using 20 calories to perform a task, it certainly wants to go out of its way to spend 50. If you imagine, food may have been much more scarce, much more difficult to acquire in the past than it is currently, where we can get as many calories as you want delivered via Grubhub. That's a different situation and very new to the human race. And so your body is always going to lean towards being economical with its calories and use the least amount that it possibly can to accomplish a task. But if the stimulus is strong enough, the body will think, well, gosh, we didn't like getting pushed to that level. We're going to have to build ourselves back up to be stronger next time so we can better face that same the same stimulus. So that's where we see this positive curve where the body responds and we acquire an adaptation. Obviously, if you've done anything in health and fitness, you may have known that when you start a workout program, whether that's doing some form of cardiovascular exercise, you jump on a treadmill, maybe a mile is very difficult for you to walk when you first get started, but if you keep doing it, over time, you will become more economical. You can walk 2 miles, and then 3 miles, and 4 miles. Same with running. If you go running 5 miles an hour, it might be very difficult for you in the beginning, but if you stick with it, your body becomes more economical, and you can start to run faster and faster and faster. And it's the same with our bodies getting more fit when we're talking about building muscle. Your body will respond to that adaptation. So understanding this curve and where these peaks are and how to have a strong enough stimulus inside the body becomes very important. You can get into a pattern where you're not allowing enough of the response and adaptation time to where if you have another workout here and then another workout here and then another workout here, when you're not giving yourself sufficient recovery time, you may be chronically taking down your health because you're not giving yourself enough time to properly adapt to the stimulus that you're giving it. You're giving too much stimulus. In the opposite way, a lot of times people can wait way too long. If you do a workout, once every 2 weeks, that may not be long enough. This line will eventually come back down to where it was because again, the body doesn't want to stick with that adaptation. If it doesn't require it, it will go back to being a little bit more economical. So this is important to get this timing right and make sure that the appropriate stimulus is given, and then also that the appropriate time to get that response is also given. And that's where, if we're skipping ahead, if we're talking about volume and intensity, this is something that becomes really important. The stimulus that we need to create the response and adaptation that we're talking about here has to be something very, very strong. And we're going to talk about that when we talk about Henneman's principle here in a second. But the stimulus that you need to give, truly need to give to have a strong enough response and adaptation is probably a lot stronger than maybe what you've experienced or what you observe as far as people going to the gym. And it rests on this teeter-totter between volume and intensity. Volume and intensity. So volume is the amount that you're doing, and the intensity is how difficult the work that you're doing is. So those two things cannot be high at the same time. If you told me you sprinted a mile, I would say, well, no, you did not sprint a mile. You maybe ran a mile, but you can only sprint. Truly sprint is like 10 seconds. The world's best sprinters only sprint for 10 seconds if they're doing the 100-meter. You can run a mile, but that's no longer a sprint. A true sprint is only done in a very, very short amount of time because the intensity is so high, right? And so a lot of times when people say, hey, I do high intensity training, and I'm doing it 5 days a week, I will look at them and say, okay, well, you're not doing high intensity training because 5 days a week would be way too much for that as far as your volume. Your volume is much too high unless you're doing, one exercise per time that you're in the gym, which is certainly fine and one way to do things. But you can't have high intensity and high volume. That can't exist. And so if you have a high intensity, your volume is going to be very low, and vice versa. So those two things are on a teeter-totter. You can't have twice. You can't have both at the same time. And if we go back to creating a stimulus to have a response and an adaptation, this stimulus needs to be very, very strong. So what I'm talking about, again, is we're pushing up the limit, or we're pushing against the limit of the things that you can do when we're doing a certain set of of strength training. So again, an example, if I'm at the gym and I'm seeing somebody do bicep curls and I see they're doing the classic 3 sets to 12 and they're on their third set and they're at rep number 10 and 11 and 12, and I don't see them really like struggling that much. They're not really pushing up against what their body already can do. They maybe got some good activity if we go back to how we define exercise, but that's not systematically pushing up against the level of strength they already have. It's only when your body pushes up against the strength level that it already has that the body has to go through the stimulus response adaptation curve that we're talking about here. So again, I think most people are going to the gym too frequently, and they're not pushing themselves hard enough when they go to be able to create the stimulus, which is needs to be very, very strong. So I hope that makes sense. I know we kind of skipped ahead and talked about that principle and intensity thing, but it's a really important thing to consider when you're designing programs and helping people with strength training. Another principle that has been very helpful in my career to learn and apply is something called Henneman's principle, or Henneman's strength principle. you may have heard that the body has different types of muscle fibers. And there's a lot of misunderstanding as far as what these muscle fibers do and what they can do and what they're responsible for. Henneman's principle says that your body will not use any more muscle fibers than it needs to accomplish a particular task. Obviously, I'm paraphrasing that. You can Google this and get the exact definition. But yeah, again, just paraphrasing, your body is not going to recruit more muscle fibers than it needs to do a particular task. And so, for example, as I'm sitting here and I'm talking to my phone, I am using muscles for sure. I would be a mess on the ground if I wasn't using some muscles to hold myself up and talk to you and have facial expressions and move my arms and all that stuff. That doesn't require a tremendous amount of force. I know I'm not using a lot of energy. I'm not breathing very heavily. My body is primarily using what we call slow twitch muscle fibers, which again, we have a lot of kind of misunderstandings. Most people do not understand what we're talking about when we say the type of muscle fibers we're primarily using are slow twitch versus the other types of muscle fibers. For the, I mean, you can pull up charts on this stuff. Again, this is just going to be an absolute flyby, but let's just say there are slow twitch muscle fibers, there's intermediate twitch muscle fibers, and there's fast twitch muscle fibers. And as we go through those different ones, say for every 10 slow twitch muscle fibers, you might have 100 intermediate muscle fibers, and then you might have 1,000 fast twitch muscle fibers. So by volume, they're much higher, and they produce a lot more force. So you have more of them. Again, that's just kind of a flyby. Look some of this stuff up if you want the actual numbers of that thing. It's just kind of a way for you to like picture it in your head. So the misconception, the thing that I hear most, even people in our industry get wrong about slow twitch and fast twitch muscle fibers, is people think that slow twitch muscle fibers fire slowly and that fast twitch muscle fibers fire quickly. And that is not true. Your muscle fibers fire at the same speed, regardless of whether they're slow twitch or fast twitch. It just depends on which muscle fibers you are firing to accomplish a particular task. What I'm talking about when I'm referring to Henneman's principle is if I reach down and I grab this pen, I didn't punch through the carpet when I picked up the pen. I was able to gently reach down, pick up the pen. It didn't require, again, very much effort. I used primarily slow twitch muscle fibers to do that because that's all I needed to be able to accomplish that particular task. Now, if I needed to sprint down the street because a grizzly bear was chasing after me, you better believe I would be recruiting a maximum of my muscle tissue fibers to be able to accomplish that task. It's just that the idea that they fire at different speeds is incorrect. They do fire at the same speeds. It's just how many of each are you needing to recruit? When we say slow twitch, intermediate twitch, and fast twitch, typically what we're referring to is slow twitch muscle fibers are slow to fatigue. Fast twitch muscle fibers are fast to fatigue. That's why if you do that sprint, you will fatigue very quickly using fast twitch muscle fibers. They didn't fire any more quickly. You're just using a much higher volume of those fibers that do require lots of glycogen, and they do fatigue extremely quickly. Here's another example that I like to point out. Like if I took you over to a leg press and I made you do a leg press, kind of slow and controlled with a decent amount of weight to the point that like you could barely like push this weight any further, again, creating a very strong response for your body to then create a response and have an adaptation to, you would eventually get to the point that you would not be able to push hundreds of pounds on a leg press anymore. You might start shaking or get really anxious, or your body just would have no more capacity to go any further. We would have to rack the weight. You might fall out of the machine, but oddly enough, you would also, after about 5 or 10 seconds, you'd be able to get up and walk around and go to the next machine if you wanted to. So that is to say that an exercise like that would exhaust all of the muscle tissue fibers all the way through to your fast twitch muscle fibers, but you still, since the slow twitch muscle fibers are slow to fatigue, you would be able to access them extremely quickly. They're very quick to recover, so you'd be able to access them very quickly. And again, you could just walk right away. You might not be able to do many more sets of a leg press, at least without taking down the weight or doing less sets or reps or whatever it is when we talk about the variables. But yeah, you would be able to go and walk away because you still have slow twitch muscle fibers. So that is a really important distinction and something really important to understand. If I can systematically take you through an exercise and work you through using all your slow twitch muscle fibers, your intermediate muscle fibers, and then your fast twitch muscle fibers. If I can systematically, according to this principle, tire each one of them out, I can get the maximum response, the maximum stimulus that gets a response from your body in a way that I know that I don't have to make you sprint. I don't have to have any risk of injury to you and your tissue by making you work fast. I don't have to have you sprint. Maybe you're going to get a hamstring injury. I don't have to have you jump off boxes or do explosive work. All of those things have their use. And in your certifications, you'll learn more about when to apply those. But those are not recommended for everybody in every population. Like, yeah, maybe an athlete can do some of that stuff. Maybe it's beneficial for them, and maybe not as much. Maybe they would be more benefited from doing slow strength training, pushing up to the level of what their bodies can accomplish by following all these principles in a way that they will never get hurt. And so as you watch the video demonstrations that I do later on, you're going to see me go through those types of exercises that we're going to talk about here in a minute. And you're going to see me do these exercises very, very slowly with control. And there is no risk of injury. I could put my 93, 94-year-old grandpa on those exercises. He would not get hurt. I could put a 10 or 12-year-old on those exercises. They would not get hurt. And anybody in between could do moving slowly with control, exercise that pushes up again to what their current capacity is to be able to create a stimulus response and an adaptation in somebody. So again, how you apply that is going to be different, and obviously different certifications will have different ways of thinking around that, but these are true principles that you can take and incorporate into your program design as you're designing programs for yourself and for your clients. I have found these definitely to be true. I've had that confirmed, again, many, many times on my podcast with experts in the field who have been training people this way literally for decades, man. Like Dr. Ben Bokikio as an example. He's an author, he's a doctor, and he's been training people using these principles. He's in his 70s now. I've literally just a month or two ago watched him train somebody through Zoom by applying these principles. And he's been doing it for years and years and years and years. And yeah, again, many different ways of doing things, but it's important to know that those principles are true. I've found them to be true as well. So really helpful to consider as you're thinking about how you're going to be training your people. Next, we're going to go to exercise selection. What I'm going to present to you today is kind of a total body type of a workout. There are just so many different ways to split this up. So obviously we know that people do splits. This came from, predominantly from bodybuilding, where, people are taking an inordinate amount of time to make their bodies, much bigger than most people like to get to. And they might say Monday is chest day, and all they do for an hour and a half in the gym is do every kind of chest exercise known to man because they're trying to maximize the damage done to the chest. And then they give it an entire week to recover the chest as they do maybe, quadriceps on Tuesday, maybe they do back work on Wednesday, maybe they do biceps, triceps, whatever. You could do an upper body and lower body split. It's very common. You could do a push day and a pull day. That's very common. I have clients that I see, some people can only afford to train 1 day a week for like 30 minutes. So that becomes very affordable. But then I need to be thinking, how are we going to maximize the time if I only have 30 minutes in a week with somebody, which is possible for sure. It's pretty easy to be able to do that and make sure that we're still getting a good result. I have several clients that get amazing results on 30-minute workout every single week. Other people have the means and they like to do multiple workouts. Some people train with me 3, 4, 5 days a week. And so we have to dance around that. And oftentimes the reason for somebody training, like I thought when I first started my career, the reason for somebody to hire a trainer is to have me come up with the exact best program design, exactly the right sets, exactly the right reps, the exact right progression, exercise in exactly right order, all that stuff, which through the certification you're going to learn and you're going to get really good at, which is great. And that's all really important. I'm not saying that's not important, but also I've learned in my career that oftentimes people hire a personal trainer, they might need some accountability. They might need somebody to talk to them. If you think about some of these people I've trained for 3, 4, 5 days a week, that's a lot of time. When that compounds over 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, I've got one guy that I've trained for like 16 years at this point. We have spent a massive amount of time together. I would argue probably more one-on-one FaceTime than he probably spends with his spouse. And I know more about that guy than almost anybody else on this planet. So you'll get to know and love your clients. If you show up and you have a good personality and you guys jive really well, you're going to get to know these people. And it becomes still important to follow the principles, but also, being a good trainer means you're, on time, you're punctual, you're, funny, you ask about their job. Like there's a lot of aspects to it. So kind of a deviation there, but I just wanted to point that out that, exercise selection and all the different variables we're about to talk about are very important. But that said, like, yeah, you're going to have lots of different clients with lots of different preferences. It's not everybody's preference. Some people know that training 5 days a week is not ideal for them based on what we talked about earlier as far as volume and intensity, but it's good for them. They like it as a mental release. And frankly, it's good for my business. So I don't turn people down when they want to do that. So that's fine. Anyway, exercise selection. What I'm going to present to you today, like I said, is one total body workout a week. We'll talk about variables here in a minute, but the way I think about this is I want to create balance in my training, meaning if I push something, I want to pull something. Through your certification, you may have learned the difference between muscle balances and how muscle design kind of works. So for example, this is, again, very much a flyby, but if you watch a lot of people who do a lot of chest work, meaning they do a lot of chest presses or flies or pullovers, they're working their chest because they want to have big chest. A lot of dudes, this is very typical. They really want to look good, and part of that is they think they need a big chest, and so they do a lot of chest work. That's all fine, but if you notice a lot of people who do that and they're not balancing it out with back work, with pulling things, what happens is when a muscle gets strong, it gets short. So the shoulders will start to pull in unnaturally. To allow that to happen, the opposite muscles, the muscles on the back, they get weak and they have to be elongated. They have to stretch. So the weak muscles of the back get really long and stretchy and weak because the chest is kind of taking over and is folding forward. So both of those things are true. So it's the same if you go to a gym and you only did bicep curls. You might have big biceps, but then your arm wouldn't hang naturally. You'd kind of look like a gorilla walking around. You kind of see this sometimes if you pay attention to people that are overtraining certain muscle groups, because the biceps muscles are getting so strong, they're getting short, and neglecting the tricep work in the back of the arm, these muscles are getting very long, which is allowing that to happen. And what that can do is that can set off a chain of reaction where certain muscles are taking on more load than they're designed, and your body will adapt to that. And it happens very commonly in a movement pattern that you'll see, whether somebody has a posture standing up or whether they're moving. Somebody that has a desk job, kids in school, they're always crouched in front, their heads down, they might be looking at a screen or working on a computer. They have this pattern. It's quite common where it's kind of like, we call it an upper cross, where their shoulders are coming forward because their back is weak. Their hips might be turned downward because their glutes are very weak and their quads are really strong. It's, again, an adaptation to the body adapting to a seated position for way too long. So all of that to say, when I'm designing a program, and again, the example we're using today is we're just doing a total body workout, but this would again be true if I was splitting this up somehow. I want equal amount of pushing and pulling in my program design. I also want to focus on the muscle groups that are more proximal in the body, because those are the biggest muscle groups in the body. And the further and further out I go in the body, the smaller and weaker muscle groups I'm working. So I'll even think of that inside of an exercise program. And I'm going to get a drink because there's a lot of content. I know I talk fast and I hate monologuing. I'm not very good at it, so I apologize. Drink of water. Okay, so here's something really common. Again, if I am setting up a program design where I have somebody come in and I want them, we're going to do, let's say we're doing a pull day. So in my program design, I've got them doing bicep curls, maybe 2 different ways. And then I've got them doing a seated row, and then maybe I've got them doing a deadlift. If you think about it, if I'm starting on the smallest muscle groups and I exhaust my biceps, that is now going to be a rate limiter in an exercise where we're still using biceps. I'm using my biceps to contract as I'm doing a row, but that, since those muscle groups are exhausted, that's going to be a rate limiter that's not going to allow me to exhaust my bigger and more important, arguably, muscle groups, which is the big muscles on my back, like my traps and my lats. We want to prioritize those biggest muscle groups by using compound lifts, so lifts that use multiple joints. And we want to prioritize them and exhaust those first before we move on to the smaller and smaller muscle groups and get further and further away from the center part of the body. Like I said, we also want to stay balanced as far as pushing and pulling. So the way this has been referred to many different ways. I'm sure I stole this from somebody in the book Body by Science. It's referred to as the Big Five. I like to refer to it as the Big Six and add a different exercise. So the way I think about this is every program, total body program that I want to design, I want to have a push that's in the horizontal plane. That looks like a chest press, right? You're pushing in the horizontal plane. How you do that? Million different ways. Doesn't matter. I'm not really thinking about that at this point. I just want to push something in front of me. Now I want to stay balanced. So if I'm pushing something in front of me, I want to pull something horizontally in front of me. So now this looks like a row. Many different ways you can do it. I'm not saying how you should do it. I'm just saying this is a row. I want those two things to be in balance. That's horizontal pushing and pulling. Now we can go vertical as well. So I want a vertical push to work those muscle groups. Another compound lift. Now you're looking at a shoulder press, or I want a horizontal or a vertical, pull. Now this is looking like a pull down, closed grip, underhand, wide lat pull. Lots of different ways to do it again, but now you're getting a vertical push and a vertical pull in your program design as well. Now we move to the lower body. And if I'm thinking about the lower body again, I want to be pushing something and I want to be pulling something. So a squat pattern is a way that I will be thinking about pushing something against the ground, whether that's a squat or a leg press. Many different ways you can do that, lunges, all kinds of different exercises you can choose, but you're driving something away from you in the lower body. And then a pull to me would be a deadlift pattern. So a deadlift pattern is more pulling something off the ground and using opposite muscle groups, where a push would be very quadricep heavy, a pull might be very hamstring heavy, and working again some of the biggest muscle groups inside the body. If I get those big six movements in my program design, I feel pretty happy that I've got really good balance. Unless there's a reason to be imbalanced, we can talk about that in a minute. But I feel pretty good that we have created a very good balanced workout program, and now I can work with different variables to, work with somebody and get them the best results. After I accomplish the big six, and you'll see this in the exercises that I filmed lots of different exercises that are not the focus. They're not the main part of my program design. I leave those for the end of the workout if we have time remaining, or somebody has a desire to work a certain part of their body for whatever reason they want. Like literally, I had a dude hire me to train him for 4 months. This is so silly, but he trained me for 4 months to train him to a trip to Ibiza. And all he wanted to do is chest and biceps, which again was the stupidest thing ever based on what I've just explained to you. But that's what he wanted, and that's what he was paying me for. So that's kind of what I had to do. That's what he was paying me for. So again, I do other exercises. They may or may not be some that are in the big six, but at the end of a workout, you want to do some bicep work. You want to do some tricep work. Maybe you want to work your calves. Maybe there's other chest exercises that we didn't include, again, like a chest fly or a pullover that you want to add to your program. That's all fine, but I never really do them if at the sacrifice of doing what I call the big six. I always want to make sure those are in my program, whether it's one time a week, split up into twice a week. Again, unless there's some type of reason. So one of the certifications that I've gotten in the past is a corrective exercise specialist, where I work with people who are already having imbalances in their muscle structure. Maybe they, did a sport like speed skating, which is incredibly, unilateral. You're only turning in one direction. Maybe somebody did have a desk job for a long time and we need to do more back work. Maybe there's a difference between the right side and left side, and we need to, adapt what we're doing. Those are all special considerations, and those are considerations I make. I also work with something called a functional movement screen, or FMS for short, which is a movement screening that takes into account 7 different screenings and 3 different tests to see how somebody's moving. And it's a scored test that I can do periodically to make sure somebody's moving well. And again, if there are things I need to change in somebody's program design, I might deviate a little bit from the big six and change some certain things. But in general, I want to be doing those 6 exercises in balance unless there's a reason not to. Now this takes us to different exercise variables. It's kind of at the bottom. Exercise variables might be things like sets. How many sets are you doing? What is the number of reps you're doing? What is the tempo that you're doing? Are you moving, 1 second down, 1 second up? Are you pausing at a certain place? Are you doing more advanced techniques like drop sets, where you're dropping the weight, getting to failure, dropping the weight, getting to failure? Are you doing things like pulses, where you're kind of hanging out? Are you holding? We call those isometrics. These are all variables that you can play with, which is great and is fine. And certain certifications will talk about different different numbers of sets and reps and percentages of one rep maximum, which is a way you can measure how much weight you can do at different percentages. And many different certifications have different ways of teaching that. I think the overarching principles that we've already talked about are more important than the variables. I don't think it's vastly different whether somebody gets 15 reps versus they get 12 reps in creating, what we call hypertrophy or muscle volume versus creating something different with higher reps, like creating endurance. I don't see a major difference there. But again, different certifications will talk about that differently. And by remembering these principles we're talking about today, this can apply to any of the certifications that you get. And you can just take that into account and do the program design the way that you want. I would always want to make sure that regardless of what you choose for sets, reps, tempo, whatever you feel comfortable with, that you remember that the main thing we're looking for, regardless of sets, reps, whatever, is the stimulus that creates the adaptive response. And again, just to back that up, I've had several people on my podcast, again, experts all over the world, tell me that none of that stuff matters as much as we thought it did when it comes to it should be very challenging. Strength training should challenge your body up to the limit of what it's capable of, and the rest of it can be semantic. Along those notes, again, we talked about different clients, different people. I have clients, again, multiple times a day. One dude in particular, I literally train him 5 days a week. We go to a gym facility to do the training. I train him in the exact same way every single day that we train. He doesn't care. He likes it. He loves the routine. We go to the same 10 machines. We do the sets and reps that we do. Takes about 50 minutes or so. He loves it. He absolutely loves it. He does not want any more design. He's not curious about other exercises. I'm thinking, okay, do we have a chest press, a row? Do we have a pull down? Do we have a shoulder press? Is there some form of a deadlift and some form of a squat? We have those, and I program around that. And once we had a routine, we've not moved away from that routine. And it's literally been 2 years that we've been training in this facility using the same machines with very little deviation. He loves it. He's getting great results. That's great. Another guy I've already mentioned, I've trained him for 15 years. We trained as frequently as 3 days a week. If I ever did the same workout with him twice, he would fire me. He loves variety. It's really important to him to vary things up a little bit. So when I'm thinking about variables for him, we're adjusting all of those things all the time. Maybe one day we're doing 20 reps. Maybe the next day we're doing 5 reps. Maybe one day we're using resistance bands. The next day we're using dumbbells. The next day we're using machines we have access to. So many different things that you can mix up and change, and you can kind of adjust that depending on your client. It's really important to talk to them. What's important to them? What do they like to do? Do they like routine? I like routine. I don't care. I use the gym to make myself strong. I minimize my time in the gym. I want to get in, accomplish everything we talked about, and get out and go live my life and have fun. I use the gym to make myself very strong for anything that I want to do. And so I don't really care to mess around and have lots of different variables. It's not a driving factor for me. For some people it is, and you need to consider that, and you need to take that into consideration, because if I had trained my guy that likes variety in the same way that I trained my guy that doesn't care for variety, I would have lost him years and years and years ago. And he's relatively fit because we've been working out 3 days a week in the way that he likes for years. So it's been great. Again, I'm thinking in my head, like I still want everything that we talked about, and I want to stay balanced with all those principles, but we can also use the variables, mix things up to keep him interested. Again, that's a very underrated and important part of personal training that you need to consider. I need to dive in and find this exact study. It's one that I've heard about, and I love citing it. I don't have the citation with me right now, but really great study that I really believe in. It's one that I refer back to quite a bit. 2 groups separated, however long it was, 2 months, 3 months. One group did the exact same workout every single day that they were, made to work out. The other group came in and did different workouts every single day that they were told to come in. Now, the first group got the best results from doing the same workout over the same amount of time, no change in the variables. The group, they got the better results. The group that came in and had something different to do every time, they liked it better and they stayed more engaged. So again, interesting teeter-totter in how you want to do your program design, because for some people, if they don't have the variety, they will get really bored and they're not going to be engaged with your workouts, and they're going to go train with somebody else or quit altogether. So again, something to keep in mind. Another thing I really wanted to mention as far as a principle is you're planning out, your workouts, you're changing things over time. there's a really important principle in personal training called progressive overload, which means that over time, if you're timing this cycle correctly, every time you do another workout and you're giving this the time that it needs, you should be able to increase the amount of work that you're doing slowly over time. Few things on that note. The way that most people think about that is they think they should be lifting more weights. And that is certainly one way to progressively overload somebody, is to give them more weight than they were lifting before. Obviously, if they do that, they are objectively stronger than when they first started. That is not the only way. And as you're training somebody, we have what's called beginner gains, where yes, in the beginning, they're going to be able to increase the amount of weight that they're lifting, but that is on a curve that is going to start to flatten out. You're going to get less and less and less results as far as lifting weights the longer and longer and longer somebody does this. That said, there are other ways and other variables that you can get somebody progressive overload without just making them lift more and more and more weight and increasing the rate of injury in that person. If somebody lifts 90 pounds one week and they lift the same 90 pounds the next week, but the second week they did one more rep, that is progressive overload. If they lifted the 90 pounds the first week for 90 seconds and the second week they lifted it for 95 seconds, that is progressive overload using the exact same weight. They are objectively stronger because their time under tension is greater. Even with the same weight, they were able to go just a little bit further. I get frustrated when people, again, are only thinking of progressive overload. I need to lift more weight. I need to lift more weight. That is certainly going to be true in the beginning. But as you go, as you get somebody with more and more experience, you're going to be adding weight to excess essentially, and you can really increase the amount of rate of injury of somebody. So wanted to keep that in mind. The last thing I wanted to really mention is correcting your clients. When I went through my certifications and learned about different exercises, that very first day of me being a personal trainer was amazing, because I was the one who knew exactly how every person and every body should do a squat, should do a chest press, should do a row. It's all spelled out in your certification. You do it exactly this way. Here's the corrections. Make sure the feet are facing forward, your elbows are at a certain plane, blah, blah, blah. With my experience in doing this over time, I found that different bodies move very differently from each other. And there may or may not be an exact right or wrong way that somebody moves and moves well. People from different parts of the world have different genetic factors, such as how deep are their hip sockets. Like there's a reason that the best power lifters in the world come from a certain background and are found in a certain part of the world, like Eastern Bloc countries, and is not necessarily something you're going to find in, some parts of Cambodia or India or whatever. It's just they're different bodies that were built for different ways. There's a reason that yogic practices came out of India and didn't come out of Eastern Bloc countries. And flexibility is a different thing. So all that to say, I correct people a lot less now than I used to. I will correct somebody if it is apparently obvious to me that they're doing something that is going to get them hurt. That is when I'm going to step in, make a correction, make an exercise change. Not every person is great at every exercise, and some people just move in different ways. And so you may find that doing something a little bit differently is, for one person, is going to be more helpful for that person. But that said, I will only correct somebody if it looks like they're going to hurt themselves. Again, going back to variables, when we talk about what's the best equipment, are machines inferior to doing free weights? Are, bands and TRX better than, doing stuff at a gym? Are kettlebells useful? Everything that you can use is on the table and will have use. I use all of that stuff with everybody. Some people have access to everything. Other people have access to what they have access to. I have a little shoulder bag that I use when I'm traveling around that has a few bands and a few little things that fit, again, in a shoulder bag. And I can effectively give somebody a total body workout that will literally kick their butt with a very simple, kit, if you will. That said, I also have access to that amazing gym that has every machine, a lot of really, really cool machines that I use for people when they're there. They get really good results as well. So, as you're learning, how to work with people, what kinds of equipment to use, anything's on the table. I would argue you can get some amazing results with a total gym, with a tonal, with resistance bands on the stairs. Like I've used all of that and gotten people really great results. A lot more that we can get into. I'm probably going to leave it there for now. There's going to be those videos that I'm going to demonstrate the big six. Obviously, you can search any of them, and there's lots of different people out there that have created videos like that. But I just wanted to show you what they all look like. Not only the big six exercises in different ways that I chose to do them for that video series, but also, like I said, some of the ancillary exercises that you can always add in, different ways of thinking about things, how to add those in. But again, that was a kind of basic overview on strength training and program design. Hope that was helpful for you. If you have any questions, you can always reach out to us directly here at Boundless Body LLC. We have a website that is myboundlessbody.com. There is a button that says connect with us. You can shoot us an email. I would be more than happy to answer questions for you. But for now, thank you so very much for watching this video, and best of luck on your strength training and personal training certification.